Historically, David lived from approximately 1010 to 970 BC, rising from the rugged hills of Bethlehem to the throne of a united Israel. He is the most developed and complex character in the Old Testament, his story spanning 66 chapters from 1 Samuel chapter 16 to 1 Kings chapter 2. David was the youngest son of Jesse the Bethlehemite, a grandson of Ruth and Boaz. Sources differ on the number of his siblings, with 1 Samuel recording 7 brothers, making him the 8th, and 1 Chronicles listing 6. Jesse, his father. An old man, when David was a youth, Jesse treated David as a minor, leaving him with the sheep, while his older brothers were consecrated for sacrifice. Jesse's surrender of David to Saul's court began the fracture of David's family bonds. Eliab, his eldest brother. Tall and impressive, Eliab was the outward ideal whom God rejected. His jealousy and scathing rebuke of David's pride on the battlefield suggest a strained, tense fraternal relationship that shaped David's early resilience. Zeruiah and Abigail, David's sisters. Though rarely mentioned in interaction, their sons, David's nephews like Joab and Abishai, became his mighty men, serving as his ruthless right hand throughout his reign. 1 Samuel chapter 16 verse 7. But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." David's life is defined by the Hebrew concept of the man after God's own heart. Traditionally, this is seen as David's piety, but the text emphasizes it as God's sovereign choice. God set his heart on David. Laws and traditions. Anointing. Samuel performs a sacred anointing ceremony with oil, a ritual usually reserved for priests, marking David as the Lord's anointed, or Mashiach. Patron-client relationship. When David serves Saul, he enters a foster-paternal bond, where Saul becomes his political father. The character contrast. David is bold and active compared to Saul's fear of man. While Saul hides among the baggage, David runs toward Goliath. David trusts in the name of the Lord, rather than the resources of worldly armor. 1 Samuel chapter 17 verses 45 to 46. David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel." For nearly a decade, David lived as a fugitive, hunted by Saul. This wilderness period was his training ground, transforming a motley crew of 400 disenfranchised men into mighty warriors. Laws and traditions. Sanctuary and bread of the presence. In an act of desperation at Nob, David takes the showbread from the priest Ahimelech. Under the law, Leviticus chapter 24, this bread was for priests alone. But David's need over tradition is later cited by Jesus as a precedent for the true intent of the Sabbath. Lex talionis. The law of measure for measure retribution governs this period. Twice, David refuses to kill Saul, stating, quote, "I will not stretch forth mine hand against the Lord's anointed." The inner life. Psalms. While the prose depicts an intrepid warrior, the Psalms reveal David's vulnerability. In Psalm chapter 56, he admits, "What time I am afraid, I will trust in thee." His God recovery begins in the caves, where he learns to yearn for the divine like a thirsty land. Psalm chapter 27 verse 14. Wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart, and wait for the Lord. After Saul's death, David is anointed king over Judah and Hebron, and eventually over all Israel in Jerusalem. He brings the ark to Jerusalem, centralizing worship. The Davidic Covenant, 2 Samuel chapter 7. God establishes a grant covenant with David, a unilateral promise of an eternal dynasty. Unlike the suzerain vassal treaty of the Mosaic Law, which required the vassal's obedience for the master's blessing, this grant is unconditional regarding the line of David, though individual kings would be disciplined for sin. The motif of the sword. The sword characterizes David's relationship with power. As a youth, he had no sword in his hand. As a king, he becomes intoxicated by power, leading to the census in 2 Samuel chapter 24, where he counts 800,000 valiant men that drew the sword. 2 Samuel chapter 7 verse 16, Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever. At the peak of his power, David falls. The fulcrum event is his sin with Bathsheba, which the narrator portrays as a, quote, power rape and an abuse of kingly authority. Laws and traditions. Menstrual purity. The narrator specifies Bathsheba was purifying herself, Leviticus chapter 15, to confirm she was not already pregnant by her husband Uriah, thus proving David's paternity. Lex talionis, the sword. Nathan the prophet decrees that because David killed Uriah with the sword shall never depart from thine house. Family fallout. David's passivity as a father, failing to discipline his son Amnon for the rape of Tamar, leads to a domestic explosion. His son Absalom rebels, leading to a civil war that shatters David's heart. Psalm chapter 51, verse 10, Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me.
In his old age, David becomes impotent, unable to keep warm or control the usurpation by his son Adonijah. He dies a grim, hardened man, charging Solomon with the execution of his enemies. Historical facts and traditions. Deathbed instructions. David's final requests concern loyalty versus betrayal. He rewards the sons of Barzillai for their loyalty, but orders the death of Joab for his treachery. Messianic hope. Historically, David's failed descendants led to the exile, but the Davidic promise birthed the hope for a new David, Jesus the Messiah, who would rule in humility and radical trust. Family tree summary. Wives: Michal, cold opportunism; Abigail, wise restraint; Bathsheba, unbridled lust; Abishag, feebleness or old age. Sons: Amnon, killed by his brother Absalom's servants at a sheep-shearing feast in Baal-Hazor; Absalom, killed by Joab and his armor-bearers while Absalom was entangled in the branches of a great oak tree; Adonijah was executed by Benaiah, acting on direct orders from his brother, King Solomon, and Solomon, his successor. 2 Samuel 23:3. He that ruleth over men must be just, ruling in the fear of God. David remains the gold standard of the Bible, not because he was perfect, but because in his success and his rough-edged actuality, he remained relentlessly responsive to God. If you found this deep dive fascinating, please like and subscribe.